Why me? What did I do to deserve this? I'm so tired of this, so tired of everything.
Jesse hated mornings. Every day, he woke up feeling uneasy, knowing what awaited him at school. He pulled on his old uniform and glanced at the mirror. The oversized shirt hung loosely on his body. He looked like any other kid, but he didn't feel like it. At school, he kept his head low. He was used to the stares and the teasing. Matthew was always there, leading the group of bullies, picking on him for being poor. "Hey, orphan boy!" Matthew shouted as Jesse walked by. "Got any money for lunch today?" "Oh wait, I forgot, you don't have any." The group around Matthew burst into laughter. Jesse didn't respond. He never did. But it didn't matter. They always found something to pick on him for. The more he stayed quiet, the worse it got. He gripped his worn-out bag tightly, his face burning in embarrassment as he stared down at his shoes. They were old and faded from years of use, barely held together, a reminder that they weren't entirely wrong. By the time lunch came, Jesse was already feeling tired. He didn't want to eat in the cafeteria where everyone could watch him. He took his lunch and walked to the back of the room, hoping to be left alone. "Look who's hiding," Matthew called out, his voice mocking. "Is the poor kid too good to sit with us?" Jesse didn't answer. He sat at the back, trying to ignore them. But Matthew and his friends were relentless. They stood around his table, blocking his way, laughing at him. "Go ahead, eat your food, we know you need it and no one cares." Jesse kept his head down and pushed the food around on his tray. He wished he could disappear, just for a moment, and escape the relentless attention. Every day felt like a nightmare Jesse couldn't escape. He tried to keep a low profile, blending into the background, but it never worked. Matthew always found him, circling like a predator. "Where's your mommy, Jesse?" "Oh, wait, you don't have one," Matthew said, his voice loud enough to draw attention. Jesse lowered his head, his fingers tightly twisting the fabric of his old shirt. "What about your daddy, huh? Is he too busy not existing to teach you how to dress?" Laughter came from the group of kids around him. Jesse stood still, his chest tight, hoping the ground would open up and swallow him. He wasn't the type to fight back, he never had been. Jesse was quiet, preferring to stay out of everyone's way. But being invisible didn't work when Matthew was around. Somehow, the bully always noticed him. The end of the school day brought little relief. Back at the orphanage, things weren't much better. The other kids weren't cruel like Matthew, but they weren't exactly welcoming either. Jesse lay on his old bed, looking up at the cracked ceiling. His hands were clenched into fists, but he wasn't sure who he was angry at, Matthew, the world, or himself. The words from earlier rang in his ears. No family. No future. Tears filled his eyes, but he blinked them back. "I'm tired of this," he whispered to the empty room, his voice shaking. But deep down, he knew, there was no way out of this life. Not yet. The next day at school, Jesse braced himself for what he knew was coming. He kept his head down as he walked through the crowded hallway, hoping, just hoping, he could slip past unnoticed. But Matthew was waiting. He always was. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence," Matthew said, stepping in front of Jesse and blocking his path. His arms were crossed, and that arrogant grin stretched across his face. Jesse held his books tight awaiting Matthew's insults. He didn't make eye contact. He'd learned that looking Matthew in the eye only made things worse. "Where do you think you're going? Got some big plans today, orphan boy?" Matthew started, his voice dripping with mockery. Jesse tried to go the other way, but Matthew moved with him, matching his every step. During lunch Jesse sat at an empty table in the corner, silently eating, trying to stay invisible as he always did, but Matthew and his crew weren't about to let that happen. They walked over, their trays in hand, their laughter already filling the air. "Hey, Jesse, looks like your lunch is missing a little something," Matthew said evilly, and before Jesse could react, he tipped his tray forward, letting a plate of spaghetti spill over Jesse's head. The cold, sticky food slid down his hair, dripping onto his shoulders and staining his shirt. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. "Look at him. It's a new look, Jesse. Maybe this will get you some attention for once." Jesse sat frozen, the spaghetti running down his face. He could feel the stares of everyone around him, the phones being pulled out to record, the murmurs spreading across the room. But he didn't say a word. He didn't cry. Slowly, he stood up, grabbed his tray, and walked out of the cafeteria. Once outside, Jesse stopped in the hallway, his hands trembling. He wanted to scream, to hit something, to make it all stop. But he knew better. He knew it wouldn't make a difference. So he kept walking, heading straight for the boys' restroom. Inside, he leaned against the sink, staring at his reflection. The food clung to his hair and clothes. Jesse turned on the faucet and began to wash his face, scrubbing away the sauce and tears. When he finally looked up again, his reflection stared back at him, tired but determined. That night at the orphanage, Jesse lay on his bed. He couldn't hold back any longer. His mind replayed the day's events, Matthew's wicked laughter, the way the other kids joined in, the hurtful comments that followed him everywhere he went. His eyes stung as tears spilled over, and he quickly buried his face in the pillow, trying to quiet the sound. But the sobs came anyway, shaking his small frame. "Why me?" he choked out between gasps, his voice barely a whisper. Jesse had tried so hard to stay strong, but tonight, it was impossible. The loneliness, the bullying, the feeling of being unwanted, it was all too much. "I'm so tired of this," he said. There was no one to comfort him, no one to tell him it would be okay. He was completely alone, and it hurt more than anything Matthew could ever say. Eventually, the tears slowed, but the ache in his heart remained. Jesse folded into himself, wishing for a life where he wasn't invisible, where he wasn't always the target. But deep down, he knew no one was coming to save him. He would have to face another day, just like all the ones before. The next afternoon in school, Jesse hurried down the hallway, hoping to avoid any unwanted attention. But hope rarely worked. He felt the sudden push before he heard the voice. "Watch where you're going, loser," Matthew said, pushing Jesse hard enough to make him stumble. The group of bullies laughed. Jesse caught himself against the wall, his heart racing. "I didn't do anything," he said under his breath, barely audible. "I'm not looking for trouble." Matthew's friends formed a wall, blocking his way. "Not looking for trouble?" one of them mocked. "Too bad, it's looking for you." "Wait, what's that smell?" another boy in Matthew's group said, covering his nose. "Is that you, orphan boy? Seriously, don't they teach hygiene where you live?" Matthew smiled and pulled a bottle of perfume from his pocket. "Let's help him out, he could use it." Before Jesse could do anything, Matthew sprayed the perfume all over him, the strong scent overwhelming. Jesse coughed and tried to shield himself, but they just laughed harder. "Much better," Matthew said, "now you smell rich even if you don't look it." Just as Matthew raised the bottle for another spray, they heard a sharp voice. "What is going on here?" Mrs. Peterson, one of the school's strictest teachers, stood, her arms crossed. The bullies froze, caught in the act. "Matthew, put that away. And all of you, my office. Now." Matthew hesitated. "We were just joking," he mumbled, but Mrs. Peterson was already walking them towards her office. Jesse stayed behind, his hands shaking as he brushed off the lingering smell of perfume. Later that evening after school day ended, Jesse was walking back to the orphanage, feeling tired and hoping to forget about his day when he heard loud voices. "Hey, orphan boy!" Matthew called. Jesse didn't want to turn around, but he knew they were coming for him. "You really thought you'd get off scot-free after getting us in trouble, huh?" Matthew called out. "Because of you, we were punished, but that's okay, I'm not offended." Jesse tried to walk faster, but Matthew and his friends caught up. One of them pulled out a phone, ready to record. "Why are you in a rush?" Matthew made fun of him. "Don't you want to hang out with your favorite people? Let's make him famous," Matthew said with a grin. Before Jesse could do anything, raw eggs hit him. They splattered all over his clothes and face. It was cold and messy. He froze, feeling embarrassed. Matthew and his friends laughed loud. The camera zoomed in on Jesse's face. "Look at this loser," Matthew shouted. "He's too weak to even fight back." Jesse wiped the egg off his face, but his hands were shaking. He couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his bag and ran away as fast as he could, ignoring their laughter behind him. He didn't stop running until he reached the orphanage. There, he found a quiet spot, sat down with his knees pulled up to his chest, and hugged his legs tightly. He closed his eyes, trying to calm down. Tears filled his eyes, and he couldn't stop them. Jesse skipped school for a week. At first, it felt like a relief. He didn't have to face Matthew and his friends. But after a few days, the silence of staying at the orphanage was getting to him. He couldn't keep hiding forever. He thought about graduation. It was getting closer, and he couldn't let Matthew and his friends take that from him. He couldn't let them be the reason he didn't make it through. The next day, Jesse stepped onto school grounds, his heart pounding. He knew Matthew and his friends would be waiting for him. Sure enough, as soon as he entered the hallway, he saw them by the lockers, eyes fixed on him. "Look who decided to come back," Matthew said with a grin. "Missed us, huh?" Jesse kept walking, not looking at them, trying to ignore their voices. He could hear them laughing behind him. "Did he really think he could hide forever?" one of them said. "Yeah, we missed watching him get humiliated," another one added. Jesse kept his head down and kept walking, but then Matthew called out again, his voice loud and mocking. "Hey, orphan boy, where's your family? Oh right, you don't have one. That's why you're so easy to mess with." Jesse felt really tired and exhausted with it all, as Matthew pulled out his phone. "This is still my favorite part," Matthew said, clicking play. "The pathetic look on your face. Classic." The video of Jesse covered in eggs started playing loudly, and Matthew's friends burst into laughter, pointing at him. But Jesse didn't stop. He didn't flinch. He just kept walking, ignoring them, his face expressionless. Matthew's voice followed him, but Jesse didn't look back. He didn't react. He just kept walking, it didn't matter anymore. He had learned how to block it out. He focused on his goal, graduation. No matter how many videos they made, no matter what they said, he wasn't going to let them stop him. Jess graduated high school with top marks, a triumph over the hardships he had faced. He had made it, he had survived and proven everyone wrong. As time went on, Matthew and his friends faded from his life. Jesse kept his focus on what really mattered, his future. He pushed forward, enrolling in college and working relentlessly to secure a well-paying job. Years later, Jesse had built a life he was proud of. As the CEO of a major company, he lived in a beautiful apartment filled with warmth and love. And despite all his accomplishments, he never forgot where he came from. He remembered what it felt like to be overlooked, to be made to feel small, and that kept him grounded, always aware of the struggle that had shaped him. One day, while sitting in his office, Jesse glanced at his inbox. Among the usual work emails, one subject line caught his eye: high school reunion invitation. He paused for a moment, reading the email again, unsure of what to think. It had been years since he graduated. His mind drifted back to those days of bullying, of feeling alone and out of place. But now, things were different. He was different. Jesse thought about it for a while, then made a decision. He hadn't been back to his old school since graduation, but maybe this reunion was an opportunity for closure, an opportunity to see how far he had come. With a deep breath, Jesse accepted the invite. He was going. It wasn't for them, it was for him. The night of the reunion, Jesse walked into the venue, looking around at the crowd of familiar faces. But none of them recognized him. Jess had gone through a huge transformation over the years. He wasn't the scrawny boy who struggled to fit into his clothes anymore. He was taller, more muscular, and his clothes now fit perfectly, reflecting his growth and confidence. As he moved through the room, he noticed Matthew standing in the center of a group, boasting as usual. "Yeah, I work for Global Innovations, the top tech company. I'm in charge of marketing now. I've been promoted twice. My life's going great," he was saying, clearly enjoying the attention. Jesse kept his distance, not wanting to get involved. But the sound of Matthew's voice brought back memories of the bullying and insults he had endured. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that he had moved on. It wasn't long before someone from the group noticed him. "Jesse," they asked, staring at his name tag. "Is that really you?" Jesse smiled and nodded, trying to keep things casual. Yeah, it's me. Matthew, still unaware of who he was at first, turned around. When he saw Jesse, his confident grin dropped. His eyes widened in surprise. Well, look who finally decided to show up, he said, walking over to Jesse. His usual arrogance returned, but Jesse could see the surprise in his expression. So, Jesse, Emmanuel asked, his tone laced with mock curiosity. What have you been up to all these years? Jesse remained calm. Oh, just working. The group around them leaned in, eager to ask more questions. What company do you work for? One of them asked. Jesse kept his answer simple. I work for Global Innovations. The moment Jesse said the name of the company, Matthew's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, Global Innovations? That's the company I work for, he exclaimed, trying to regain control of the conversation. What position do you hold there? Jesse smiled, not missing a beat. I'm the CEO. There was a moment of stunned silence. Matthew froze, his face paling. Jess had said it so casually, but the weight of those words hit everyone in the room. The people around them exchanged shocked glances. What? Matthew stammered. You're the CEO? Jesse nodded, his smile unwavering. Yep. My company has branches all over the country. Matthew's face turned from confusion to embarrassment as he realized what had just happened. The same boy he had tormented in high school was now in charge of the very company he worked for. Jesse had clearly surpassed him in every way, and Matthew had no words left. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Matthew approached Jesse. He looked uneasy now, his once confident demeanor gone. Jesse, he started, his voice quieter than before. Why did you hire me? If you knew who I was, why promote me? Jesse looked at him with a calm, measured gaze. Like I said, I have several branches. I can't exactly keep up with who I employ. But if you've been promoted, it means you earned it. I don't let personal feelings get in the way of running my company. He paused, then added with a faint smile, besides, we're not kids anymore, Matthew. People grow up. With that, Jesse turned his back and walked away. Matthew stood there. For a moment, he thought he should say something, apologize maybe, but his words failed him. As Jesse walked out of the venue, he felt no need for revenge or validation. He had built a life he was proud of, one rooted in hard work, resilience, and kindness. The satisfaction didn't come from showing Matthew what he had become, it came from knowing he had risen above it all. Jesse had long learned that the scars of the past don't define you. True strength is found in how you choose to carry them, and success is built on the steps you take forward. He understood now that bullying might feel like it lasts forever, but it doesn't shape who you are unless you let it. People can be cruel, but the most important thing is how you rise above that cruelty. The strength to keep going, no matter how hard it gets, is what shapes your future. Kindness and hard work are what truly matter. They make you stronger, and no one can take that away from you. Jesse didn't need validation from the past because his present was already filled with meaning, and that was all that truly mattered.